Hi, this is Alan Golden. This is the second part of What Does a Diploma Mean? A presentation about the new CDE graduation requirements and what that could mean for Montrose County School District. There is an online form at the end of this presentation. We would like to get as much feedback and input from folks as possible, so we encourage you to fill that out. My contact information is on both this slide and the last slide of the presentation. So I would like to start this part of the presentation talking about polarities. The first part of the presentation talked about what CDE's goal was behind having new graduation requirements, why we were having new graduation requirements put into place, and then we looked at what both Olathe and Montrose high schools currently require. So polarities are choosing something and then giving something up. So this is a little map of how polarities work. I'll give an example. If you manufacture a product and you have a choice, you could either reduce your costs of manufacturing that product so you could make things cheaper, or you could improve your product, which would cost more money. Both of those have potential benefits. Both of those have potential drawbacks. So that is a polarity. You make a choice, you look at all of the options, you try to measure positives and negatives, but you usually give up something to get something else. And in this graduation requirement process, I think there are several polarities that we can look at. So for example, rigor versus risk. It would be pretty easy to set up some really high graduation requirements and say that every student needs to master a really high level to graduate. The potential downside of that would be the risk that we might not have a very high graduation rate. Other polarities to think about: flexibility versus management. Sometimes if you have a lot of different opportunities for students to show competencies, the management of those different paths could be difficult. Status quo versus innovation. That's pretty straightforward. Do we want to do something very similar to what we've done? Or do we want to look at changing the process and making it better, potentially? And then the last one is choice versus universal requirement. So I'll show you some models that are out there. Some districts have decided to have every student do some type of capstone project, for example. So that would be a universal requirement, not a choice. Other districts have opted for the arrangement that students could show that they're ready to graduate a variety of different ways. So there's choice. But I think each of these polarities is worth considering, and I would like at the end, when you fill out the survey, to give us some feedback about which side of some of these polarities you think we need to focus on as a school district for our graduates. So some of the models that are out there, and there's links on all three to take a look at if you would like to. Falcon's 49 Pathways, Mapleton's Traditional Requirements, plus a capstone project, and then Roaring Fork had a combination model, in some ways very traditional with what they've done, but they've also added the ability to pass out of some classes and show some competency so you do not have to take certain classes, so they have some increased flexibility. So we'll look at all three of those. Falcon's model is called 49 Pathways. It definitely uses flexibility. They use ICAPs for students to choose which of the 49 possible ways they can demonstrate graduation competencies. So this is for English. They also have another slide for math. I'll just show you the English one. So each of these sets of footprints is one way that a student could show that they are competent in English and can meet that requirement. So you have different pathways that would be based on the student's ability level and also their post-secondary plans, what they want to do after high school. Mapleton's model is very traditional. They kept their graduation requirements very similar to what they had, and they added a capstone project. So you can take a look at what they have. This is the first page. Their credit requirements are very similar to ours in our district. At the end, though, they added a 0.5 capstone project credit, and their explanation is that it could be an independent research project, a community service experience, or an individual career and academic portfolio, an ICAP, which all students are required to have. Roaring Fork, again, kept in some ways they kept their traditional requirements. They did offer, though, some competency options. Their credits obviously do not match ours, but they do have some interesting ideas in there with a student could graduate early, but every year that they are there, they have to take English. So they can pass out of some classes, they could potentially graduate early, but they have to take English if they're in school. So that's one example of some potential flexibility, but a model that's very similar to what they had in the past. The next page of this, there are science requirements. They didn't get rid of those. I just cut them off on that particular slide. The page didn't quite fit on there. And they also added a capstone project, which is there right before where it lists credits. So those are three models that are out there. I think they're fairly different, which is why I chose them for this presentation to take a look at. I think you could have some potential negatives and positives for each of those models. So if we take a look at Falcons, Falcons uses every possible way that the state gave us in order to demonstrate flexibility and demonstrate competency to graduate. I think that's positive, especially for students. One potential negative could be management of tracking all of those various pathways. Mapleton had a universal capstone project, so everybody knows what they're supposed to do. It's one requirement, and they kept their traditional course requirements, so I think that would be easily accepted. One potential negative is creating what that capstone project should look like and what the criteria is for it. And then also, there's not a lot of flexibility. It is one model. Roaring Fork, again, had the universal capstone project. One potential positive would be having the proficiency model, allowing students to possibly test out of some classes if they demonstrate mastery. This could be somewhat of a paradigm shift. We don't do a lot of this currently. And then again, creating that capstone project criteria would be key in that process. So those are just three models that are out there. We could do something different as well, again, as long as we meet or exceed those requirements that the state set out. So our steps as a district, we are gathering input from as many groups as we can, to be honest. That's why this video is online. We would like to take all that information and really do a good job of coming out with what the best potential graduation requirements for our district and for our graduates will be, that really meet the needs of our area. And then when we have those requirements, we will go through the approval process. I showed you that in the first part of the presentation, and get ready to implement those. Again, the first class this will impact is the class of 2021. These guys will be 8th graders in the fall of 2016. 2016. So they are currently 7th graders in the spring of 2016. So more information is definitely out there. CDE has a ton of stuff online. I also included an article about House Bill 16148. That is the potential law that would add a citizenship test to this process. Now it is time for you to give us your input. So please consider the information that you saw. There are about 4 or 5 questions. We ask that you give as complete and detailed information as possible in this form. If you have any questions or comments, please contact Alan Golden. Again, my email address is alan.golden@mcsd.org. I can also be reached at 249-7726. Or if you're calling from a district extension, just call 4902. Thank you very much in participating in this process, and take care.